colon cancer has affected my family as well, which is why I got involved with this disease more than 2 decades ago. And I think that the stories that I could tell today to the audience really reflect those 2 decades in the patient world. First in the United States for half of my career, and now in the last more than a decade, I've been on the global space in the patient advocacy arena, running the Global Colon Cancer Association. And so I personally saw um, back in the late 90s when my mom was diagnosed with colorectal cancer, uh, the lack of innovation. What was world like then? There was one drug approved for colorectal cancer that had been around for more than 30 years and was highly ineffective. That was it. There was one treatment choice. And as a result, when you had metastatic colorectal cancer in the 90s, um, you had a 95% death rate within the first couple of years. And the average life expectancy was about 7 or 8 months, about the same time my mom lived. And so fast forward now, 20 years later, there's more than 16 approved drugs in the United States for colon cancer. And what have we seen? You could talk about these bumper stickers, but when you actually talk about data, uh, we've seen a drop of the death rate of more than 50%. 50%. Breast cancer can't say that. There's almost no other major cancer that you can say the death rate has dropped over 50% for the metastatic patient over the last 20 years. And that's solely because of innovation. And that's the space that I'm living in colon cancer. But I could go on and on all day with examples, but a couple of other ones that people should be thinking about when thinking about this issue is, well, what does this have to do with what we're talking about? Colon cancer and innovation and IP, how do they all come together? Well, um, the way they come together is that without innovation, we don't get to these treatments. Look at the hepatitis C space. When my god uncle got hepatitis C, it was just in the beginning of when these treatments were coming out, these new treatments for hep C. And we know that the old treatments were very ineffective. They were very harsh on the patient. They didn't cure it, and they were extremely expensive. Now you look at the treatments for hep C, it's cured. They literally cure this disease with a few weeks of treatment. And what has IP done for that? Well, it encouraged the development of that drug, and it encouraged the development of competitors so that the prices come way down for this hep C cure. And I really wish that my uncle could have gotten access to that cure because he would still be alive today. He was a perfectly healthy guy, except that he got hep C in the Army. So you look at that, we're now talking about cures to previous death sentence diseases. We're seeing in the cancer world life extensions that are beyond our imagination just 10 years ago. And all of that is happening because of the investment that was done a decade and a half ago in innovative medicines. But the point that ties it all in is that these investments don't happen without IP. Without IP, investors don't invest, right? We know that because they're investing a lot of money to get a drug to market. We know that the success rate in getting a drug to market is extremely low, maybe 3 to 5% of initial drugs that start out actually make it to market. So you're talking about a cost of billions of dollars to get a drug to market. And with all that risk, there better be assurances on the other end that if you do get a good drug that's helping people, that you're going to be able to recoup your investment. And that all relates to IP. And I'll finish with what I talked about in the prep call, which is there's no better example than right now with COVID-19. And I happen to have had two pieces that ran in the last week on this exact issue. One ran in Penn Live, and then just today in Delaware Today, very targeted placement. I have an op-ed running on exactly how IP and the challenges to IP can affect cancer patients. And the bottom line is that we're less than 2 years into the first exposure to this virus. And because of IP, we had incredible investment into this vaccine. The vaccine got developed. The vaccine was more than 95% effective. And we just heard from Moderna today that 6 months later, it's still 95%, 94% effective in preventing this virus. So, incredible that this was developed. And not only developed, this vaccine has now been administered in more than 4 billion arms around the world. And there's current challenges to this system that's working. And there's no question this system's working. Less than 2 years out, more than 4 billion people have been injected with an extremely effective vaccine. And there are challenges to that right now, right here in the United States. And our current administration is actually supportive of breaking the patents on these very effective vaccines for certain places. And that really is a short-sighted viewpoint in my point of view, and that's what my op-eds talk about. Because if you take away the incentive from industry to develop and distribute a massive vaccination program like this, who knows what this virus could have done if we didn't develop these vaccines? Who knows how many, could it be billions of people would have died from this disease? We don't know. Thank goodness we won't know because of innovation and because of IP. So I could go on and on, but I'll stop there. And hopefully I tied that together for the folks listening.
Yeah, no, and we'll come back to an awful lot of that here in a little bit. So we'll put a pin in that. But amen to everything that you just said. So thank you very much. I appreciate you being here.